Hello everyone and welcome to a brand new episode of the Sports Insight with your host Alamdar Khan. And yes, as you know, we give you sports information from all across the globe. You guys can surely reach out to us on our social media handle, which is @ Indus News Sports. That works both for Twitter and for Instagram. But anyways, we'll go to the headlines first. And yes, from the world of Euro 2020, Italy continued its unbeaten run to defeat Spain 4-2 via penalty shootout on Wednesday. And yes, from the world of NBA, Phoenix Suns beat Milwaukee Bucks 118-105 in Game 1 of the NBA Finals. And from the world of Wimbledon, Hubert Hurkacz faces Roger Federer after beating Medvedev in Wimbledon 2021. And yes, from the world of cricket, England names the entire new squad for the ODI after the virus outbreak. And yes, those were the headlines. And yes, what a thrilling match to begin with. Yes, we're talking about the first semi-final that managed to take place. And yes, finally it came up to a point when Italy managed to win against Spain. Initially, the score was 1-1 and it ended up with extra time. But even after the extra time, it came up to the penalty shootouts. And eventually, Italy won 4-2 against Spain. To discuss the in-depth analysis, we have with us Robert Blanchett all the way from the UK. Robert, welcome to the show.
Thank you, many thanks.
Great. So, Robert, we'll surely start off discussing the match that actually took place and how close it was, because Italy managed to score the first goal. Obviously, Federico scored on the 60th minute, but then there was a comeback from Spain, and obviously Alvaro managed to score on the 80th minute. But I think it was a very electrifying match to begin with. But I think it eventually came up to the penalty shootout, and Italy managed to win that. So, what's your take to begin with about this first semi-final?
Well, it was certainly one of the best matches of the tournament, and I think we thought it would be close. I think many people believed it would go to penalties because of the nature of the two teams.
Right.
But I think Italy have been the better team across the whole tournament, and that panned out really in the penalty shootout in terms of the confidence levels. Spain have had problems with penalties over the last few months, and it really did show. Italy are a worthy team now to get to the final. They've had a great tournament, and they're very, very close to lifting this trophy.
True. And the point is, obviously, Spain, otherwise, in terms of the overall performance, I think it was definitely one of the best games that we've seen so far. But yes, what do you think? They should have thought of this, or maybe had their hands on practice on this as well, because we all kind of had an idea that it would be a head-to-head match. But then coming up to a point of missing 2 penalty kicks against Italy in the semi-finals is definitely not what the Spaniards were looking for.
No, and I also think that this Spanish team, it doesn't have the talent of previous generations. You know, we've been used to seeing Spain compete at the highest levels in tournaments.
Right.
And I think they've done very well to get to the Final Four, but I think that was probably their ceiling this time around. They don't really have maybe the Champions League winning quality of the likes of Ramos and Casillas and the superstars, obviously, of the Barcelona team of years gone by.
Right.
But it's still a very good team, a team based on a strong midfield, but maybe without the attacking impetus that maybe their previous teams had when they were winning tournaments.
Right. But if we look back into Spain's performance against Italy in the last 14 games to begin with, obviously Spain have only lost 2 of the matches. And I think this is one of the most crucial matches that they eventually lost.
Yes, but I do believe that kind of coming into this game that Italy were the favourites. You know, Italy have had a great tournament, but they've also had this incredible unbeaten run now, which is kind of dozens and dozens of matches going back, hardly conceding a goal. I think they only conceded their first goal in almost, 30 games, 2 or 3 games ago, and it shows how strong they are defensively. And they're a real cohesive unit now, Italy. They've got good leadership, obviously, under Mancini. And incredible belief. This is probably the best Italian team that we've seen now this decade.
Right. And talking about Italy, obviously they managed to score 12 goals at the Euro 2020, and obviously it's their 10th tournament final that they've reached to. So they will be facing either England or Denmark. How do you see the preparations in terms of that match? Because obviously Denmark came a long way to where they are. But yes, when we talk about England, their last victory, 4-0, was on fire. So how do you see this next semi-final that's going to be underway?
Well, I think Italy will be hoping that Denmark make it through. It would be a huge shock. In the sense that obviously this game is at Wembley Stadium, obviously England's home.
Right.
And England have slowly but surely started to go through the gears and improve. An incredible performance against Ukraine, 4-0.
Right.
And really, it's all against Denmark tonight. But of course, the story of the tournament has been about Christian Eriksen, obviously earlier in the tournament. And people have stuck with that narrative. And now that Denmark are in the semi-finals, really anything could happen. But England are the favourites. But Italy will be absolutely hoping that Denmark make it through.
Right. And for instance, obviously the Danish team obviously put in their level best to be where they are right now. They have shown some serious good work in terms of their performance. But yes, not to forget that England is right now at the best of their football performance. And yes, they surely have that home stadium edge, if I'm not wrong. So how do you see that impacting the performance of the England team?
It will impact the team, no doubt. England will have 60,000 people there tonight at Wembley Stadium, fans.
Wow.
And this is something that obviously in COVID times we've not seen for a long time, this kind of level of support. And there's a big feel-good factor around the UK at the moment, certainly for the England team. When you look at where we've been with the pandemic and the way that the Euros obviously was cancelled last time around and where England are now, there's a huge buzz towards England making their first tournament final since 1966, was obviously when England last won a major tournament at the World Cup. It's a huge opportunity here for Gareth Southgate and his men. Denmark are a good team. They've done really, really well to get to the semi-finals, but they are not on England's level. And the pressure really is on the Three Lions now to perform and to go out and get this victory.
Right. And talking about this next match that you just mentioned, 60,000 fans out there. The question is, we still have the pandemic situation everywhere, and there have been news circulating lately in terms of the coronavirus situation, and as we know, the Delta versions out there. And a lot of people have criticized UEFA, over the whole situation because of, the crowded numbers of people going to see that. And I've heard a lot of news out there that actually states that, once again, the transfer of the virus situation is getting there. Because I've seen the matches, you've seen the matches. It's a very rare, odd situation. In these times, we see people without their masks, without taking care of the situation of the pandemic.
Absolutely, and it is hugely controversial. We're at a moment in the UK now where the coronavirus levels are rising once again. We're kind of on the cusp of yet another maybe disaster in terms of infection rates.
Right.
But the UK government have looked at it and decided that this is the moment to kind of go for it. Masks will not be mandated going forward. Tonight, you'll see in a stadium with 60,000 people, if England win that game, how do you control that many people in a relatively small space? So these are all questions to be answered. But you're right, we're at a stage here now where maybe caution would have been better than having 60,000 people in a stadium. But I think also the fact that England have got to this tournament semi-final and fingers crossed for a final as well in their home stadium, it feels like that has been overlooked in terms of potential infection rates.
Right, and talking about the potential infection rate, talk about even if England wins or even if it loses. We all know if there are celebrations, there would be like high-end celebrations, but if they lose, obviously there would be another impact. But yes, the government needs to look into the situation of how to control this, because controlling 60,000 people will surely be a difficult task. And talking about 60,000, it can be an absolute multiplier in terms of spreading the virus.
Absolutely, and everything you're saying makes total sense. So it's a question that really needs to be posed towards the Football Association here in the UK, in England, and also to the UK government. But it's something that they announced yesterday that they are willing to take this risk, that they believe that there are more positives than negatives. But we are still before maybe another wave of the pandemic outbreaking here in the UK before the autumn and the winter. So it is hugely concerning.
Well, we hope things shape up well. But anyways, I'll still talk about the second semi-final because, that's the highlight of the day. And so how prepared do you think England is? Because up till now, I think finally they have come up to a point of being there. But it's surely going to be very interesting to see how the Danish team faces England tonight.
Yes, and it really is a kind of maybe David and Goliath situation in the sense that Denmark were not expected to do anything in this tournament. But I think many people felt that if England did get to the latter stages, with the stages being at Wembley Stadium, that they would have a kind of unique opportunity to win a tournament. So England did well to get to the Final Four in Russia for the World Cup.
Right.
And that itself was a huge surprise. But
Right.
I think many people felt that if England got to this stage, that they would run into a team that they would be able to beat. And certainly Denmark are one of those teams that England should be able to oversee. The England preparation has been fantastic. I think Southgate's got it completely correct, all his selections and his tactics. And there's a temptation maybe to look forward ahead of the Denmark game. But of course, England need to get the job done, first of all, at Wembley, before they can start thinking about the Italians.
Well, if we look back into the time when England have won just one of their last competitive meeting with Denmark, if I'm not wrong, and with the victory that came back from 2002 World Cup, but obviously that was for 3-0 if I'm not wrong. But I think it surely will be an interesting take overall to see, but the home ground advantage will surely be at play.
Oh, 100%. And also, we mustn't forget that Denmark, through most of the tournament, bar one game, which I think was the last one in Baku, they've been based in Copenhagen. So this is the first time that they're having to step away from their comfort zone, and they're kind of really jumping into the lion's den. There'll be 60,000 people there. And the passion and focus for English people at the moment for this tournament is huge.
Right.
And there is this real feel-good factor here in London and beyond that England can win this tournament, and that they would have to dispose of Denmark in a style that befits where they are in this tournament.
Well, thank you so much for putting in your best and providing us information, the in-depth analysis from Euro 2020. We're so looking forward for England versus Denmark. Thank you, Robert.
Many thanks.
So that was the in-depth analysis in terms of how things are going to flow. Obviously, England is going to face Denmark tonight, but not to forget that Italians have finally managed to reach the finals. So it's either going to be England or Denmark after this match that actually takes place. So once that's decided, we'll probably have a better idea who is going to face Italy in Euro 2020 finals. But anyways, we'll take a quick break. Once we get back from the break, there is more coming up from the world of sports. See you guys after the break. And yes, welcome back from the break. And yes, before the break, we were discussing the Euro 2020. Not to forget that, Italy has finally managed to get there where they're supposed to. They're in the finals, but it's going to be England versus Denmark that we're looking forward for an interesting semi-final. But anyways, we'd want to switch over to the next game. Yes, we were talking about NBA, and yes, talking about the finals of the game one. Yes, the Suns managed to beat Bucks 118-105 in game one. And to discuss the in-depth analysis, we have with us Isabel Gonzalez all the way from the US. Isabel, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Great. So Isabel, to begin with, the first game that actually took place, Phoenix Suns versus Milwaukee Bucks, the final game one, and obviously it happened in Phoenix. Obviously, the home ground advantage for sure with Phoenix Suns, and not to forget that, Giannis managed to come back, but obviously managed to score only 20 points. And we talk about Chris Middleton, who's managed to score 29, but eventually they came up to a point of losing against Suns. So what's your take, and how do you see this further developing? Because obviously the next game will definitely be away for Phoenix Suns, and do you think they're truly prepared for that?
Well, I think the main takeaway here is, fans were absolutely crazy in Phoenix. They definitely, the team was definitely able to feed off of that energy. And I think that's exciting, after COVID and everything, they really needed that. But
Right.
both of these teams are very, very hungry, because this would be the Suns' first championship ever. And the Bucks haven't gotten one since 50 years ago.
Right.
So both of them are very, very hungry. I think that's going to be kind of like the theme throughout all of this. Both fan bases are going to be very excited about all of this.
Right.
And Phoenix played well. The Bucks, I think for them, it's going to be a lot of adjustments, especially on defense.
Right.
But just looking at the game, there are definitely a couple little things here that, like things like free throws. We can talk about that later, but I feel like people might start maybe getting a little bit too excited about Phoenix, but they're going to have to, keep an eye out for the Bucks.
Right, and to be very honest, I have seen them perform lately, and I think the way that they managed to reach the finals was super interesting as well, because they did not have Giannis for the past few games, but they managed to win and they managed to get to where they are. So I think it will slowly and gradually develop. But if you remember, if you saw the game in terms of Bucks, obviously Giannis, even though he made a few shots, obviously he managed to have like 17 rebounds and 4 assists while scoring 20 points. He still had some issues in terms of limping on his feet, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, and yes, obviously, like it comes down to Giannis because he's a star. But what I think the Suns are very successful with, that I think the Bucks could take a little bit of notes on, is that the Suns are very deep. So if their star players, you have Devin Booker and you have Chris Paul, but like look at yesterday, like Devin Booker wasn't shooting that great. Like 10 of his points came from the free throw line. And of course, Chris Paul had a great performance. But what's been so successful about that team is just how any guy can step up any given day. And the Bucks are going to need some of that. Like, these are the finals. Like, you can't just rely on one guy. If Giannis comes down, there has to be someone else. And Chris Middleton did step up. I think his matchup against Devin Booker was going to be very, very important. And he performed well. Just the fact that, Booker got on the line a lot. But yeah, in my opinion, it's going to come down to not just Giannis, but just how do they defend better? How do they have other guys step up? And another big matchup was going to be Chris Paul and Drew Holiday. And Drew didn't play he played some defense, but he didn't shoot very well. He went 4 for 14 from the field. So that's not going to really help your team very much.
True. And if we look into Suns' performance, obviously talk about Chris Paul, he was literally scoreless in the first quarter of the match. But then he literally exploded and went on fire and ended up scoring 32 points. And if we look back at the first quarter, obviously the lead initially was of Milwaukee Bucks, not completely, but at the middle of the first quarter, the lead was 20-18. And then instantaneously things changed, and the Suns managed to reach 30 points in the first quarter, and Milwaukee Bucks ended up scoring 26 points. And then slowly and gradually, the deficit started increasing by the end of the first half. So how do you see them? Because this time, obviously, Milwaukee Bucks were not in their home court. When they will be at their home court, how effective do you think their performance will be?
I think it's going to be a lot more effective, of course. I do feel like Phoenix had to have at least, the fans had to have at least some impact on their performance, right? When Giannis is shooting free throws, you can hear the whole arena just counting, and that's got to get in your head. So the Bucks are going to have, a little bit of an easier time when they're at home. But like I said, a lot of it's also going to be adjustments. Because if you look back at like the Bucks and Atlanta first game, there were some adjustments to be made, and they made them because they're here. So it's only the first game. That's why I was saying that I feel like people might be a little bit too excited about the Suns right now. They were the favorites anyway, like before this game. Everyone picked them to win. But you can't be overconfident right now, because after one game, you can make a lot of adjustments. And this game wasn't, a huge blowout. Like I mentioned before, a lot of it, like free throws. The Suns, they made 25 out of 26 attempts. That's more attempts than the Bucks had. They had 16 attempts. So that in itself, like just that difference, they made 9 free throws. That difference of like the points in just the free throws, like could have made a difference in the game.
Right, and if we look back into when Giannis went away, obviously Milwaukee Bucks eventually went down. But the way they made their comeback to reach the finals, I think even when Giannis wasn't there, they still managed to score and get to the game by winning, obviously, 4-2. So I still think that, now is just the beginning in terms of how we see them performing. But I think the gelling in part for the Bucks, in my opinion, is probably more stronger, even though with the firepower of, Chris Paul at Suns, and obviously it's going to be very interesting to see how things develop. And what's your take in terms of the overall gellingness of Bucks itself?
I think they're not bad. They're obviously good. They made it this far. But if you compare them to the Suns, I think the Suns are very deep, but they also have a lot of chemistry. And like I said, with the Suns, you can have anyone kind of step up. And I feel like the Bucks really need to focus a little bit more and just have some guys have bigger moments. You can't just rely on Giannis, because it is the finals. It's not just the regular season. It's not even early on in the playoffs. Like, this is it. So it's going to come down to who wants it more. And for that to really show, the whole team has to be on board, and the whole team has to just know when to step up.
Well, to be very honest, I think in terms of who wants it, I think both the teams are actually looking forward to get this, because I think in terms of being the hot favorites, yes, the Suns are the hot favorites. But yes, in terms of Milwaukee Bucks, my mind changed in terms of Milwaukee Bucks performance was a straight lead against Brooklyn Nets if you look back into the play-ins. And I think they have a lot of potential because nobody can easily face back in the times when the play-ins were there. It was a very technical thing to face the Brooklyn Nets because they have had a huge firepower, but Milwaukee Bucks managed to do so. So I think they do have that spark that maybe can be effective against the Suns.
Yeah, I think the Bucks have experience in their roster, and they also have a lot of height. They have a lot of tall players.
Right.
They're athletic. They're very strong. Like, they can play aggressively, so they can use that to their advantage. That was an advantage that they had with their previous opponents, and I think, they are going to make some adjustments, and that's going to help them. Right now, people might be like, okay, well, Chris Paul was amazing during the first game. But again, it's a lot about the matchups. Drew Holiday maybe didn't have the best night. Like, he knew he wasn't shooting well, so he tried to contribute in other areas. He ended up getting like 9 assists.
Right.
And I believe that he's probably going to shoot a little bit better when, in the next game. And he's going to maybe try to stop Chris Paul a little bit more. It's not always going to be so easy for him. Right now, Chris Paul was guarded by bigs right now. And when you have like a big and a point guard, that's kind of like a point guard stream,
Right.
So yeah, it's going to come down to adjustments. And of course, they both want it, but the Bucks do have the tools to do it. Like I said, they have the athleticism. They can play aggressively. Just got to take advantage of all of that stuff.
True. Absolutely true. Isabel, well, thank you so much for discussing this game. I'm so looking forward for the upcoming game on Friday. Thank you very much for being a part of the show.
Thank you for having me again.
Great. So yes, that was Isabel, and we talked about the Game 1 final, how interesting it was. And yes, the Phoenix Suns yet again, as I told you guys before, won against the Milwaukee Bucks 118 to 105. But I still think they need to look more into the defense side, because if Milwaukee Bucks manages to do so, it would be super interesting to see making that comeback, because I think obviously it's going to be total 7 games. So I think they do not want to lose the track of scoring and catching up with Phoenix Suns and continuing to do so, because at one point, one of these teams eventually will be losing. But anyways, this was from the world of NBA. I'll quickly jump over to the next news from the world of tennis. Yes, talking about Wimbledon, a very interesting update. Hurkacz will be meeting Roger Federer in the quarterfinals at Wimbledon. And not to forget that Roger Federer is now the oldest individual who is in the quarterfinal in Wimbledon in terms of his age. But anyways, Hurkacz managed to beat world number 2, which obviously surely is a disastrous perspective. Obviously, Medvedev lost the game. Not to forget, this game was halted because of the rain delays, and eventually he managed to win the game against him, and he managed to win that in 5 sets. So I think it was slightly because everybody was expecting Medvedev to be there, because we were looking forward for Medvedev to face Roger Federer, but unfortunately it has come up to a point of Hurkacz to finally do that. And when he won the match, obviously initial delays, I think it was the momentum that was not there, because of which I think things changed. But anyways, Hurkacz will be facing the Swiss 6th seed, of course, as I mentioned before, Roger Federer. So we're actually looking forward for how things develop in that. And I'll quickly jump over to the next news from the world of cricket. Yes, as I had discussed with you guys earlier as well, England has actually managed to name an entire new team, obviously because of the fact that coronavirus outbreak. And 3 of their players and 4 support staff were infected, because of which they eventually decided to keep their entire team at isolation. And now we are expecting a different team. Obviously, Ben Stokes is also announced as the England captain right now. From obviously the squad is definitely going to be different, and they will be having 9 uncapped players, because Pakistan is there, and obviously they're also trying to keep their level and morale high because of the fact the coronavirus outbreak is still out there. And England were initially all set to have this without any changes, but I think after their third match against Sri Lanka, they managed to come up to a point of contracting the coronavirus situation. But anyways, I hope things go according to plan, as per because our team is touring there, so let's hope all goes well at the end of it all. But anyways, guys, if you want to reach out to us, you can on our social media handle, which is the rate of Indus News Sports. That works both for Instagram and Twitter. Till then, take good care of yourselves, and bye-bye.